Hill-Stead Museum in Farmington is an important cultural and recreational resource within easy reach of all the cities and towns in central Connecticut. Hill-Stead Museum is a place where art and nature flourish together, just as the family that designed this estate intended. Hill-Stead is a colonial revival house built at the turn of the 20th century and maintained just as it was when the family that built it lived here. Hill-Stead is their outstanding art collection. Hill-Stead is 150 acres of fields, trails, and scenic views. Hill-Stead is May Market and other seasonal events. Hill-Stead is also a beautiful sunken garden, the site of the annual Sunken Garden Poetry Festival. This program and the ones that follow are an invitation to attend this summer's series of poetry and music events.
For this series of programs, we have picked readings from the summer of 2016. We hope they will give you an idea of what it's like to spend an evening or an afternoon in the Sunken Garden at Hill-Stead Museum. And we hope you'll join us during our 25th anniversary season in 2017. This summer, Hill-Stead welcomes the following poets. On opening night, we welcome back Billy Collins on Wednesday, June 21st. On Sunday, July 9th, Jamal May and Tarfia Fazula will perform in the garden. On Wednesday, July 19th, we welcome Cornelius Eady, along with the winner of the 2017 Sunken Garden Poetry Prize. On Sunday, August 6th, Mark Doty and Eileen Miles. On Wednesday, August 16th, it's Connecticut Young Poets Day. We welcome our Fresh Voices student competition winners, along with Ocean Vong. People love the informality and outdoor setting of this festival. You can bring lawn chairs or blankets, pack a picnic, or buy dinner and wine from the vendors here. There's an hour of live music first, anything from jazz to folk to classical, and then you can hear some of the best poets in the country read poetry that is relevant and accessible. One of the country's leading poetry events, the festival introduces audience to U.S. and state poets laureate, Pulitzer Prize winners, and other major American poets in the intimate, informal setting of this historic garden. The festival's ongoing popularity is evidence that poetry still holds an important place in American culture, and that poetry has a unique power to remind us of our own common humanity.
Heather and a couple of people had mentioned this poem during the preview called Portage, Ohio, about a diner. And it's not in the book, but I was able to pull it up, so I wanted to be able to read it. It's been a while, but I'll give it a shot. Portage, Ohio. I drive to Wisconsin every summer. You can hear, I drive to Wisconsin every summer, Wisconsin. And we stop in Portage, Ohio on the way, because it's a freakishly long drive that will make you cry. So this is Portage, Ohio. They do not make iced coffee here. And Fox News is bolted to the ceiling, cranky as an old crow. Coffee, hot, is 75 cents for a small, and while the waitress, smilin' a meth-toothed coming up, fixes two, the only other customer is blessed with a pancake the size of 3 regular ones. A batter puddle morphed into a child's dream. A syrup sponge the circumference of an ends table's top. a basketball hoop, a Sunday's hat straw brim. This is a flying saucer hurled down from the 1950s and skidding to a halt at the only booth manned with an appetite. Like a looking glass, like a low note held long, like a hubcap settling from the wreck of the week, it lies belly up and waiting for some sweetness. This is the size of a grown man's leaning forward, circling to embrace it perfectly. Hands clasped as if in prayer, head down, paused, or just lingering in the absoluteness of a gesture so similar to protection, so close to comfort, to a time when all he had to do was draw the world into his arms and begin to sway. Thanks. Have any of you ever gone abroad, traveled abroad, and looked at the menus, and they hand you that English menu in Paris, and it has all these ridiculous, like, mistranslations for what the food should be? Well, that kind of inspired this poem. I actually thought I could possibly feed myself through Europe by walking into restaurants and saying, hey, I'm an English professor, give me a meal and I'll fix your menu. Worth a try. This begins where the city streets string white lights across their throats. When most have shut their doors, reduced the living to one room. This turns with the underside of the waiter's wrist, clearing dishes. A small table cluttered with utensils dangerously nestled together. And I have eased off my heels beneath the table. The last customer, the last sip of red. This, like words translated from the menu. Trout in heavy sweater. Flavored fir tree buds. Even the softened eggs of the large birds. And ladle after ladle of fire over custard, the burning pudding. And I unhook the spoon from its mate, fill its belly with the first best bite, ferry it across the night, this city, the river swallowing its stories in a hush just outside. This won't stop. Salad of goat heat, flow and flight, consuming this language and its silk dress of cream. Thanks. Next up is a long sequence, 18-part poem, which I will not make you all suffer through on this beautiful warm day. So skipping ahead. But it's about Matisse, if you like him. One of the things I like still lives a lot, still life painting, and one of the things I'm always extraordinarily envious of with still life paintings are the titles. Things like, chicken or lemon with glass of white wine. I actually was just at the New Museum a couple days ago, and literally the title of one of the paintings is Large Green Head. I was like, as a poet, why can't I do that? So titles are hard. So this is called White Underside of Turkey Feather Against Green Slope. Here. White underside of turkey feather against green slope. Sweat like paste and the scent of vanilla. Summer at a highway rest stop. The sluggish heat and heart of oil, gas, the stalled adventure. So one fear pulls in all the others, and the tires swish to the rhythm of want, want, want. It breathes against the car's window. And a girl in the back seat emblazons her initials. I see them carved against her cheek as they ramp up to speed. So I steal this, the only thing with grace. Everything else is exhaust and sky. Like the gulls. I often cheat. I told you I don't like titles. So often the title is the first line. Like the gulls that stalk the beach, appetite is about fear. Not enough, no seconds, none for you. The small orphan Oliver's hollow bowl, and his stomach, like ourselves, caves that swallow and are empty again, and always, so always this. It is not hunger that starts the jets of saliva, that orders from both sides of the menu, then calls the waiter back, asks of sides, potatoes and cream, the fallen stalks of asparagus, roasted garlic in cheese with lime. No. Hunger listens to be called inside, where it slides into place at the table, smooths a napkin across its lap. But appetite is not called. It sneaks, sidles, swoons at the trays of pastries in the window, weeps as it slips the first bite between the lips. This is what fear tastes of: butter, honey, and glass. And I'll finish up with this one. And I had been to Paris a number of times, and I've been to the Louvre, had been to the Louvre 3 times before I ever actually made it inside the building. The first time there was an alarm, and just as I paid, they told me to leave. It's like, well, that's a trick. The second time I sat on the wall and ate in a huge, wonderful box of pastries, and then, I was just too tired to go look at art. So by the third time, I actually saw something. So this one's called The Museum Goer's Strategy. The Museum Goer's Strategy. And thank you all for your attention. Don't start with the Madonna dead on the table. Go back. Start with the hours, walking the cool draped halls, looking for the open window to show that the rain has stopped, and it is time to go out, away from the grand relay of art, triptych to French fowl, head limp on a platter with a lemon and glass of white wine. Start earlier. The flight to Paris, plane's ascension, nails half moons in Laurie's hand, and before us, always before us, the idea, packed in a suitcase, embarrassed to be seen with. Hemingway, Stein, Fisher, snuck in as contraband. And before this, the hoshi on the wall of my mother's living room. A single tree, limbed in gold, painted blue and alone against a flat, empty horizon. Or even farther, my father's bonsais, those islands, each with its own palm tree and castaway, sunk in the still study, and no one could keep them alive after his death. Start sooner. With the shock, he spent a summer bullfighting, learning to plant his feet, practicing the Veronicas, Cape crimsoning the air. No, sooner. Like the opera always playing in the background of memories. The control required as the scale is strung. The huge leap to find the upper notes. Stay in one place. Paint a solitary tree. I have flown 6 hours to be where I am. Finally, stopped before Caravaggio's Rejected Mary, the one too gray, too swollen, too naked. The museum asks in 5 languages for its patrons to leave. Now, it is time to start. Thank you so much. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce Heather McHugh. She is the author of 8 collections of poetry. I Shot was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Hinge and Sign was nominated for a National Book Award, and most recently she has the wonderful new book, Upgraded to Serious. Heather as well is a translator, and she has numerous volumes of translation and also a book on craft, essays. She's the former chancellor of the Academy of American Poets and has received numerous, too many to list, really, grants and awards. Most recently, though, among them was a 2009 MacArthur Genius Award, which she received and then actually used to create this incredible organization for caregivers that gives them much needed relief to people who are full-time caregivers. And so she has stepped away from teaching full-time, if I'm correct, as one of the founding directors of this organization that supports people who are doing some of the hardest and most underappreciated work in our culture. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce a poet who Matea Harvey had described as the Wile E. Coyote of poets, who I think is just fantastic. So Heather McHugh.
Thank you. I'll project, I promise, when necessary. Barbara, Susan, Lisa, Allison, Connecticut Humanities. And man, I grew up in rural Virginia, and I live in rural Washington State, and I lived in rural Maine for years, and I had to come to the very backyard of Miss Porter's to hear some real cracker music. Thank you. My passion doesn't matter to a soul. My craving for a passion in return is one unholy imposition. Not that holiness is on my bucket list. The kicker is my high horse keeps me above company. Could I not settle, one day I shall have to, into earth or when cremandered out of thickish air, for simple unarousability? For a condition in which all the fine distinctions, one and many, mineral and vegetable, are only taxonomic dust upon an incidental breeze? Is it not joy enough to feed some plants and mingle with some unclaimed dogs? The lower orders love me, even when I'm crabby, dumb, or unadorned. How ask a man, and not just any man, to give up all his fine distinctions and become, by dint of such a love, mud-spattered, Matterhorned. And, I mean, this may be one of the last of the love poems. Postcard from Provincetown. It's not the provinces exactly, though 400 miles away you are the heart of civilization to my mind. At hand, my loneliness perceives the waterside's cubes and blocks amounting 4 mere miles away across parabolas of bay, with late sun crazing them, to gold, extending hertz, so I intend. My windows full of shorelines gone, the gulls slide by, symmetrical in wind and glass. Anoint my future, oh amazing memory. The only boat is 2 boats, leashed to a single puncture point. There's one little poem that I did I owe entirely to the caregivers that I've been meeting lately. I knew that as I was getting older, things weren't going according to my game notion. My game notion in my 20s and 30s was I would know more and more. I would get more and more tedious. I would exhaust knowledge, and then why live? You know, I mean, I would dry up and blow away. Instead, every decade, things got stranger and more vertical, more odd, more mysterious. what a lucky break that is, as, you know, all kinds of other things fall off. You might as well have this other world to explore, and it's not even nameable as a world. It's a dimension, or many dimensions. And one of the things that happened to me, I mean, first of all, out of the blue, this absurdity of getting so much money from the MacArthurs for, you know, what I couldn't help doing anyway. And at the same time, I had for years been obsessed with, you know, I find that among my colleagues, the same thing happens. My friend David Shields, who stutters, is sort of obsessed with language, the very thing. He has an obstacle. There's this obstacle vis-a-vis language, and that's the very thing he gravitates toward. And all my life, I was, morbidly shy. I was the one in school who never talked. Once in 12th grade, I said something, everybody turned and looked at me, and I thought, that's why I never said anything. And look, how absurd. I'm the one standing facing the wrong way, making noise. And then when I got this money, the people I was really obsessed with, as I always have been, is the ones who can't talk or can't see, or, you know, who can't get through, or other people don't notice. And in this case, as it happened around that time, I became very absorbed with the souls who for 10 years or more had been taking care of someone who couldn't talk, walk, or feed himself. So there's a kind of double obstacle there, because you notice the guy in the wheelchair generally, but you don't always notice if it's, you know, not an electric wheelchair. You don't notice, say, the woman who's been standing behind him for 20 years. Or in the night, the ones who don't get out because all night, every 2 hours, they're, you know, feeding someone or giving medicines or changing diapers, and all day and all night. And it's a life they choose. Generally in America, there are choices. And all the more one loves their love. There's something amazing about those choices. And also I'm so fascinated by the sort of lacunae between such lives and then the lives of regularity or normality, self-styled, that entitle themselves not to hear, not to notice, and so on. So one of the things I did when I started this nonprofit, Care Gifted, that gives getaways to these caregivers who are generally many of them, the one we try to select for the ones who are most exhausted or on the point of breaking. One of the things that happened was I started to notice from their application letters how interesting the language was, how every portion of the language had the whole dilemma in it. It was something fractal about it. So I decided to do this generated linguistic notion where I would take the number of letters in their last name, and every Xth, 7 letters in the last name, every 7th word in their application statement, I would write down, just to see if there was some tendency that ran across, despite syntax, despite rhetoric, despite semantics, whether something would emerge. And this poem is made entirely of those transcripts. And it's surprisingly coherent. So I thought I'd just share it with you. It's been amazing to be in my 60s, I've got to say. I thought the first 60s were sort of scary, actually. Everybody else loved them and thought they were heroic or something. Not me. You know, the only time my father ever came to visit me, I said, let's go to dinner. We went out to dinner. We came out of a subway in Harvard Square, and there were policemen beating people. And my poor father, who already it was a big deal for him even to, get in touch with me, he got blood splattered all over him. That taught him. It was like, so the personal and the historic so weirdly clashed. There is the odd thing about those 60s was precisely this sort of odd, wrenching juxtaposition of the personal and the historic moments. And I was pretty much caught between those two, especially as a shy person. I was demonstrative, but in private. Everybody else demonstrated in public. I was just totally not geared right. But now in my 60s, my gears are shifting. I don't know, but it's been a joy meeting these other people, and hearing their words. And here are some of them. Whole Times is a sort of expropriated title. Age 33, fine at forever baby trade. News? News didn't murmur. My beautiful girl B.I., and she loves books. On November 4th came 7 bumpy months storming in. Now of the writing I had screaming. Years my girl was her feedings. Years, sons, December bicycles, him falling at me, man side up. Outside was alone, 12th hour to care for his night. Rare medications, numerous treatments, largely 3, the youngest certified. I am that old round motion, cannot know trapped sense from well people. One old lymphoid, his language overwhelmed. How many? How survived? Each as our death night. Tell how, stranger, whole times where truth, changing entire, does 4-piece noises. That's music. It's all theirs. Going on 1,000, this poet seems to me like a brother of a kind. He's a gardener, you know, like there's a certain streak of gardenerhood among poets. There's, you know, Kunitz and you know, you get that there in every backyard has its little version of it, and every page with a lyric poem on it is a tended bed. But there's sort of highlight cases. I mean, in Hawaii, everywhere, and I love that this guy Su Tung Po in China, his dearest life was making gardens, which he did for ceremonial occasions, also for governments, for national parks. It's wonderful to be here in this garden and to be able to read a translation of Su Tung Po. But he has this other half of his life, which is that he also, while tending and keeping the garden very happy and tended, he enraged politicians by telling wild truths about them, and then he would get thrown out of the county he was in. He would have to start over all somewhere else, and he would make a new garden. So the poems themselves alternate in the same way, pastoral poems and these sort of spiky, spicy little political poems. And I'm going to read you one called On the Birth of a Son. When a child is born, the parents pray for health and high intelligence. Well, as for me, I tell you, vigor and intelligence have wrecked my life. I pray this baby we are seeing walloped, wiped, and winningly anointed turns out dumb as oakum, weak as wickerwork, self-satisfied and sinister. That way, he'll crown a tranquil life by being appointed a cabinet minister.